Makita? Kashan!
Mrs. Abbott, the head of the orphanage, screamed at us. Kashan swung at me, but I dodged his blow and punched him in the stomach. Before I could deliver another blow, Auntie Pearl, one of the workers at the orphanage, held my hand. That night, I went to bed without dinner. Life at the orphanage was tough, but my life was about to change. Continue watching my story to see how. With a birthmark as big as mine on my face, I was a target for cruel words at the orphanage. Anyone who even thought about saying anything to me would be floored in 3 seconds flat. One afternoon, Auntie Pearl pulled me aside and handed me a palette of makeup when I was 12 years old.
You can't fight everyone, so let me help you cover it up.
Auntie Pearl gave me my first makeup lesson that day. One problem was that I couldn't wear waterproof makeup because I was allergic. At age 14, Auntie Pearl walked into my room.
I have great news.
Her eyes lit up.
Miss Abbott wants you downstairs in the office ASAP. There's a couple that wants to meet you.
I danced around the room before I quickly composed myself and headed to the office. When I got to the office, I greeted everyone and Miss Abbott introduced me to Mr. and Mrs. Bailey. They looked like they just stepped off the front page of a magazine, from their clothes to their shoes to how attractive they both were. Mrs. Bailey said that I'd be a perfect fit for their family, which consisted of 3 boys and 3 girls. I couldn't believe it. I was finally getting adopted. About a week later, I said my farewells and left with Mr. and Mrs. Bailey. I was taken on a shopping spree where I bought everything I wanted, even a TV for my room. My own room! The Bailey estate was huge. The lawn was perfect, and the fountains and flower plants scattered around the lawn added that extra flair. Once inside the majestic house, I met the rest of the family. Callum at 20 was the oldest, then Rose at 18, Daphne at 17, Jeffrey at 15, and the twins, Catherine and Hank, at 14. They all welcomed me warmly. On the first day of school, I was scared to death.
Don't worry, Makita. You'll fit right in.
Catherine squeezed my shoulders kindly. My fears subsided when I realized that my siblings were the most popular children at the school. It wasn't long before I was taken in by a group of popular girls at the school, and the next few months went by smoothly. Mom insisted that I try out to become a model like the rest of the family, and modeling soon became a part of my life.
Hi, how was your weekend?
Tremaine smiled at me as he fell into step beside me at the school hallway. Tremaine wasn't the cutest guy in my grade with glasses and braces, but he was one of the kindest. It was great. I had a few modeling gigs. What about yours?
It was okay. So, I was wondering,
He said shyly.
can I take you for pizza this Friday after school?
I blushed. I never had a boy interested in me before. I nodded.
Great, meet me at the school's gym pool. We'll go as soon as practice is over.
Well, Friday rolled around, and as I walked past the pool to get to the bleachers, some of the guys were passing with some gym equipment. As I tried to wiggle past, my foot slipped and I fell into the pool. Panicked, I tried to keep my head above water. Suddenly, I felt a strong arm across my stomach and someone pulled me out of the pool. It was Coach Gibson. I sat up, gagged, and coughed. Then the strange looks and whispers began. I got up and ran away. I didn't stop until Tremaine grabbed a hold of my arm. I covered my face. Tremaine gently removed my arms, but I bowed my head as I tried to catch my breath.
You need to get out of these clothes or you'll catch a cold.
I stood silent.
Makita, look at me.
I can't. I don't want you to see how ugly I am.
You are the most beautiful girl I've ever met. And if you don't get out of these clothes, you'll be the sickest girl I've ever met.
Tremaine convinced me to go back to school and put on an extra sweatsuit that he had in his locker. He told me to wait in the girls' bathroom while he retrieved the clothes in my wet book bag. Tremaine walked me home and not once mentioned my birthmark.
I'm sorry our pizza date didn't work out, but don't worry, we'll do it another day.
He kissed me on the cheek and left. I walked into the house and followed the sound of the laughter. Everyone was gathered in the TV room. Good morning, everyone. One by one, they all stopped what they were doing to look at me, to look at my face. My siblings doubled over with laughter as Mom walked up to me and held my face.
What is this? Why is this on your face?
I pulled away. It's my birthmark.
No, this can't be happening. Not during the height of the modeling season.
Mom threw her hands into the air. I ran to my room. The next morning, when I woke up, I saw a note on my dresser. Mom said that going forward, I should address her as Mrs. Bailey, and she canceled all my upcoming modeling gigs. Over the next few weeks, one thing led to another, and I became invisible to the family that once loved me. Tremaine was my only friend. I spent some afternoons with him and his grandmother. I was even invited to dinner a few times. One afternoon when I was in the school's bathroom, a few girls entered.
And Tremaine may not be the cutest guy, but he is still too good to be seen with Makita Monster.
The girls laughed hysterically. I pushed open the stall of the bathroom and glared at all the girls. The girls scoffed at me and turned to walk away. I grabbed the ponytail of the closest girl and dragged her to the floor. It wasn't long before I dealt blows to everyone. Eventually, I was dragged out of the bathroom by a teacher and was sent to the principal's office while the other girls were taken to the nurse's station. I was suspended for a week. Back at school, everyone was talking about the school's annual beauty pageant, to be held in a few weeks. As soon as I got home, I spoke to Mrs. Bailey about it. She laughed.
You, in a beauty pageant. A Bailey has always won that pageant. It's a family tradition. And how do you plan to pay for your dresses and costumes?
I can use my allowance money. Mrs. Bailey thought for a few seconds before she responded.
You can participate in the pageant, but you will no longer receive an allowance.
Mrs. Bailey walked away. That night, I went to dinner again at Tremaine's house. During dinner, I picked at my plate.
What's wrong, honey? You've been quiet tonight.
Tremaine's granny touched my hand slightly. I sighed heavily and told Tremaine and his granny that I wanted to enter the pageant show that the school was hosting, but I didn't have the funds.
I'm sure we can find a way to raise funds.
Tremaine said. We?
Sure, why not? What are friends for?
Over the next few weeks, Tremaine and I worked hard doing odd jobs in the neighborhood, and Tremaine's granny worked tirelessly to ensure my gown and costume were gorgeous. Finally, it was time for the pageant. After the contestants were given the rules and showed their dressing rooms, I went in search of Tremaine. As I walked into the courtyard, I spotted Catherine and Tremaine kissing in front of everyone. Tremaine? Tremaine pulled away.
Makeda!
I walked away quickly, my cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I stayed in my dressing room until the show began. And boy, was it a show. During the dance routine, my heel flew off. Next, bits and pieces of my costume fell apart on the stage as I paraded. For the talent part, the wrong CD was played and the microphone sounded awful. After my performance, I entered my dressing room and picked up my last outfit, my evening gown. There was a huge hole in the midsection of my dress. Numb, I sank to the floor. There was a knock on the door.
Makeda, please open up.
I didn't move. I heard the door open and Tremaine sat next to me on the floor.
I overheard Catherine and Daphne. They've been sabotaging you, which included the kiss you saw.
I hesitated. Then I hugged him. I couldn't do this without my best friend. Tremaine took the dress in his hands.
Makeda, I can salvage this.
About 15 minutes later, the dress looked fabulous.
You don't live with a seamstress and not pick up a few things. It's amazing what you can do with safety pins and duct tape.
Tremaine joked. Tremaine stepped out of the room and I quickly slipped into the dress and stepped out of the room.
You look amazing.
Thank you. I gave a little twirl. Tremaine extended his arm and I took it. As we walked towards the stage, Mrs. Bailey walked towards me with a mug of water in her hand. Is she go... Before I could finish, I watched in horror as Tremaine stopped Mom from throwing the water on me. They scuffled for a few seconds before the mug of water slipped and splashed all over Mrs. Bailey's face. I gasped loudly before I placed my hands over my mouth. Mrs. Bailey's eyes widened in fear before she ran away. Just then, Stacy, the stage assistant, walked up to them.
You need to get onto the stage now.
I shook my head. I can't do this.
Makita!
Tremaine called after me as I ran behind Mrs. Bailey. I found Mrs. Bailey in the parking lot leaning against a car, drying her eyes. I stood in front of her and didn't say anything.
When I was younger, I was playing with matches in my room. At that time, Mom was in a wheelchair because she was sick, and Dad went outside to water Mom's flower bed. It wasn't long before my entire room was on fire. Both my parents died in that fire, and that day haunts me even now. I went to live with my grandmother, who blamed me for her son's death and called me ugly until the day she died when I was 16 years old. I tried to have surgery to remove my scars, but it didn't help.
Mrs. Bailey, you're a beautiful woman. She looked up at me and smiled. We hugged. Did this mean everything was back to normal? It turns out it meant nothing at all. Around 3 p.m. the next day, Mrs. Bailey knocked on my bedroom door, opened it, and stepped into my bedroom.
Makita, there is someone here to see you.
Mrs. Bailey stepped aside and Mrs. Abbott walked in with an apologetic look on her face.
Mrs. Abbott, I'll leave you to it.
Mrs. Bailey walked out of the room. Let me guess, you came to take me back. Mrs. Abbott hugged me.
I'm so sorry to put you through this.
I walked out of the Bailey's household with just the clothes on my back. 3 years later, on the front page of the local paper, Mrs. Bailey was arrested for an embezzlement scandal at her company's grandest party of the year. With all their funding on hold, the Bailey family lost everything. I can't say I feel sorry for them though. I guess this is just karma biting back. On my 18th birthday, I gathered my things and kissed Auntie Pearl and Mrs. Abbott goodbye and left the orphanage behind. At around age 22, while working the afternoon shift as a waitress at a small cafe, someone walked up to me.
Hi, Makeda, is that you?
I looked at the person blankly.
It's me, Tremaine.
My eyes lit up and I gave him a quick hug. It's nice to see you after all these years. How have you been?
How about we catch up over dinner tonight?
I agreed and we exchanged numbers. I'll call you when my shift is over. He smiled.
Great, I'll see you in a few hours.
That night was the rekindling of a friendship and the beginning of so much more. He mentioned how refreshing it was to see me in my natural beauty. As the time passed, weeks turned into months and months turned into years. Tremaine and I are now planning our wedding. In life, some people will love you just as you are, while others will never like you, no matter how hard you try. Choose your friends wisely. They are a reflection of how you feel about yourself.
So, are you excited?
My best friend Sam asked as we packed our stuff. It was our final day of college and we were getting ready to leave. Excited about what?
Come on, Ricky, your parents are loaded and they have a fancy job waiting for you. I, on the other hand, have my brother's couch waiting for me.
Sam was right. My parents owned one of the biggest law firms in the country. In a few weeks, I'd be joining them, putting my law degree to good use. I couldn't wait. I'll talk to them about offering you a position at the firm.
Really? What if they say no?
Dude, don't worry, my parents will never say no to me. However, a few days later when I spoke to Mom about it, I was in for a rude shock.
Absolutely not. We're not going to give Sam a job just because you asked.
But Mom, I promised him.
Why would you do such a thing? We are not a charity organization, Ricky.
I really pleaded with her, but she didn't budge, so I had to go over to Sam's house and give him the bad news. I'm really sorry. I was so sure they'd take you.
Don't worry about it. Come on, tomorrow is your first day. Let's celebrate.
Sam said cheerfully and put his arm around my shoulder. I'd expected Sam to be mad at me, but he wasn't. What a cool friend I had. Too bad by the end of this video, Sam and I will no longer be friends. Want to know what happened? Keep watching. Hey Mom, which one is my office? I asked, walking into her huge office on the top floor of the building.
Please have a seat, Ricky. I need to talk to you.
I sat down eagerly. She probably wanted to discuss my salary, or maybe she was about to assign me my first client. How exciting, I thought.
Ricky, you are not ready to practice law yet. You're fresh out of college.
I stood up and took a step back. What? But you said I had a job waiting for me here.
You do have a job here. You'll be working in the copy room, making photocopies, and printing documents.
This had to be some kind of joke. The copy room? I worked so hard in college only for you to send me to the copy room? Why? At this point, I was shouting so loud it was starting to attract the attention of other employees.
I can't tell you why. Now get to work.
There's no way I'm working in that dusty old room.
Then you'll starve and live on the streets.
You're kicking me out?
We won't have to if you take the job we are offering.
I walked out of the office and took the elevator to the basement of the building, which was where the copy room was. I hated my life. Months went by and my parents didn't change their mind. I hated going to work and I was starting to hate them too. At home, I avoided them and chose to spend most of my time out with Sam, who still hadn't got a job.
They're being so unfair. I mean, you're their son. How can they let you suffer like this?
Sam and I were playing video games at his brother's house. I don't think I can do it much longer. My paycheck is a joke. I deserve to be paid so much more, and they know it. It's not like they can't afford it. I feel like they don't care about me anymore. I don't even think they'd miss me if I disappeared. Sam looked to be in deep thought.
What if you did?
He said finally. Did what?
Disappear.
You're not making any sense, dude.
Think about it. What if we made you disappear? Do you think your parents would pay to get you back?
You're scaring me.
Hear me out. You disappear for a few days. We make them think you've been kidnapped and ask for money. They pay us and boom, we're rich.
You are crazy. I laughed, but Sam didn't. Wait, you're serious?
Very. So, what do you say?
What do you think I said? What would you say? Would you fake your own kidnapping and make your parents pay millions of dollars? You might not like the choice I made, but remember, I was very angry at Mom and Dad at the time. Planning the drama we were about to stage was easy. Oh, in case you were wondering, I said yes to Sam's devious proposal. We needed a place for my kidnappers to take me and keep me, up until the exchange was made. Sam's brother was out of the country, so we decided his basement would work perfectly.
This room will be great for photos and the ransom video,
Sam said excitedly as we toured the musty room. Just then, the doorbell rang and Sam ran to answer it. I followed him and found him fist-bumping two strangers, a young man and woman, both around our age. They were carrying shopping bags.
Ricky, meet my cousins Dave and Jenny. They'll be helping us with your kidnapping.
I had no idea we were involving other people.
We have to make it look believable. They also brought supplies.
Supplies? I was now realizing that Sam had put much more thought into this than me.
Yeah, we brought masks, zip ties, duct tape, and other things.
Jenny answered. I stared as they emptied their shopping bags on the table.
Sam said you'll be asking for $1 million from your parents?
Yeah.
There's been a change of plans. You need to ask for $2 million.
What? Why?
Well, Jenny and I are part of the deal now. Do the math, Richard.
I didn't like Dave's tone. Also, he looked like he hadn't had a shower in weeks. Sam? I looked to my friend for help.
Dave is right. $1 million is too little to split 4 ways.
Sam could hardly look me in the eye. What was he hiding?
We have him, and all we need is $2 million and we'll let him go.
A masked Dave stood in front of a camera, recording the video to be delivered to my parents' house. I sat directly behind him, tied to a chair, my head hanging low. The whole scene was straight out of a movie. It had been 2 days since my family last saw me. Our plan was going smoothly so far. Sam and Dave had grabbed me outside the firm as I walked to my car. They'd put me in a dark van, then drove off.
You have 4 days to deliver the money to this address.
Dave recited the address to an old isolated church that was no longer in use.
Do not call the police or alert the media if you want to see Ricky again,
he threatened. Early the next day, Dave, disguised as a pizza delivery man, left a pizza box at my parents' front door. Inside the box was a flash drive with a video and photos of me tied up in the basement. 4 days later, we all got in the dark van and went to the church. We parked behind some bushes and waited. What if they don't show up? I asked nervously.
Then we keep holding you,
Dave said sternly. What? I never agreed to that.
Relax, he's just messing with you.
Sam laughed.
Guys, look!
Jenny exclaimed. We all looked out the van to see a car approaching. That's Dad's car. We watched as Dad got out of the car carrying a duffel bag. He looked around for a few seconds, then placed the bag on a bench. When he got back in his car and drove off, Sam ran to the bench and grabbed the bag.
Woohoo! This is incredible! I can't believe they were dumb enough to believe you were in danger.
Clearly, Sam was having a great day. On the other hand, I was overcome with guilt.
Cheer up, Ricky, we're rich! Now go home and put on your best show.
A few minutes later, they dropped me off a few blocks from my parents' house. After rolling in the dirt a few times, I walked up our driveway and rang the doorbell. Mom opened the door and screamed in horror.
Goodness! What did they do to you? Are you hurt?
Mom had been fussing over me for close to an hour. I'm fine, Mom. I just need a shower and some rest. Truth was, guilt was eating me up and I wanted to get out of the room as fast as I could. Just then, a worried-looking dad walked in.
Ricky, you're already home?
Yeah, Dad, they dropped me off down the road.
Where were they holding you?
I really don't know. They blindfolded me the whole time. Please don't call the police. The kidnappers said they'll hurt one of us if we talk to the cops. Also, I didn't see any of their faces, so...
Ricky, please calm down. We know you've been through a lot the last few days, but there's something we need you to know.
I sat down and they looked at each other uncomfortably.
Before your grandmother died, she left you a lot of money.
She did? Why didn't you ever tell me?
Well, the money came with some conditions.
What conditions?
First, you had to graduate college, and second, you had to work in the firm's copy room for 1 year. Once you fulfilled those 2 conditions, we were to release the money to you.
I was in shock. So this is why you had me working there? I thought you hated me.
What? No. We always want the best for you. But we had to do as she asked so you could get the $2 million in her will.
$2 million? That's a lot of money. I'll continue to work in the copy room until the end of the year like Grandma wanted.
Ricky, we are afraid the money is gone.
What? Gone where?
When you got kidnapped, we didn't have the money they were asking for. So we spoke to Grandma's attorney and she agreed to release the money Grandma left you.
I didn't like where the conversation was going. Dread filled me, and at Mom's next words, I realized how much I had messed up.
We are so sorry, dear. We had to give them your money. We were afraid they'd hurt you.
Mom said tearfully. No, this isn't good, I exclaimed, startling them.
What isn't good, son?
I stood up and paced around the room. I had just given most of my fortune away.
Ricky, we're sorry you're upset, but your safety is very important to us.
I don't care about that. So many things went through my mind. Should I reveal the truth to see if Sam and his cousins would give back the money? I was almost sure we'd all be arrested. But what other choice did I have? If I stayed quiet, I'd lose $1.5 million. Mom, Dad, I have to tell you something, I finally said. Then I told them everything.
I'm going to kill you, you coward!
Dave shouted when he saw me at the police station. After I came clean to my parents, they had called the police immediately. Sam and his cousins were arrested soon afterwards.
Whose idea was it? Who started all this?
Mrs. Baker, Grandma's attorney, asked. My parents had called and asked her to meet us at the police station. It was Sam's idea, but I went along with it, so please don't punish him alone. He's my best friend.
Well, I have some information that might make you want to reconsider that. Sam knew about the money your grandma left you.
Of all the things I expected to hear, that was not one of them. What? How?
While you were both in college, he worked for me as an intern for several months, but I fired him because I found him looking around in my office once. I never trusted him after that.
Are you sure he knew about Grandma's will?
Yes, it was on my desk when I walked in on him. He was reading it.
But he couldn't have.
Stop defending him. Jenny just told the police how Sam approached her and Dave with a proposal. He promised them $100,000 each if they helped out with the plan.
But Sam said we were dividing the money equally.
He lied to you. He was going to take the biggest share. Also, Jenny and Dave are not his cousins. Sam found them on the street. They're both homeless.
How could I be so foolish? I apologized to my parents numerous times. The cops told my parents that I was in trouble, but not as much as Sam was. My parents also informed me that I'd not be getting Grandma's money anytime soon. I went back to working in the copy room, hoping that one day they'd forgive me.
Even getting out of bed in the morning is thrilling in my home. I roll out of bed and plummet to the net below. Bouncing on it wakes me up, so I can climb the remaining 50 feet of rope and silk and finally land safe and sound on the ground, only to find myself surrounded by lions. Want to see more crazy stories like this one? Show us some love by hitting those like and subscribe buttons below. I usually spend my days running from one place to another, and that day was no different. I'm always delivering wigs, carrying sacks of peanuts, and helping set up the food stands. But it's worth it, especially for that night. That night, our circus was in that city for the first time ever. Here's the wig you asked for, Mom, I said as I walked through the beads on my parents' tent entrance.
Thanks, Pumpkin.
She said. She was sitting at her vanity doing her makeup. I could tell something was off, because her hand was shaking as she applied lipstick. I was about to ask what was wrong when my dad strutted in. He was getting ready for the show by lifting his huge weights. He put them down and his arms were shaking. Kidding weak, aren't you? I laughed.
Watch who you call weak, kid.
He grumbled. My dad was super strong, though. I mean, that was his whole act. So I didn't know why he was shaking. Are you guys okay? You both seem nervous, I said to my parents.
We're fine, sweetie. Go finish getting ready for the show,
said my mom. As I was leaving, I turned around and saw my dad rubbing Mom's shoulders and whispering. I stood behind the heavy curtains hiding from the audience. With a loud bang on the drums, most of the lights went out, except one spotlight. I rolled into view for the audience on an enormous ball. Ladies and gentlemen, I exclaimed as I rolled around the stage. It's my honor to present. There was a drum roll, then all the lights turned on, revealing everyone in our circus. Fantasy Circus! The audience went wild. As the ringmaster, it was my job to get the show started, but after that, I only had one routine. From backstage, I watched my parents work their magic. I was a little worried because they seemed on edge, but the routine went perfectly. My mom pretended she fainted while on the trapeze. only to fall into my dad's arms and be juggled like a ball. The music changed to something more exciting. The spotlight was the only light on again. I walked into it calmly.
Ladies and gentlemen, what would you do if you were faced with a beast?
I asked the audience.
A beast so powerful, it could tear you to shreds.
I exclaimed. When I felt like I could cut the tension with a knife, the lights then turned on fully, revealing 2 huge cages at my sides, full of lions.
Dearest audience, I do ask you to keep your screaming to a minimum. I may be strong, but even I may be powerless if these beasts become agitated.
I explained in mock concern. I threw smoke bombs in front of the cage doors, and when the smoke dissipated, the doors were open and the lions were free. To the audience, I looked terrified. I acted as if I was trying to find an escape. The lions were preparing to charge at me, leaving a gap in their circle. A rope dropped down, so I ran to grab it and swung over the audience. The lions came chasing after me. I was focused on my act when I got distracted by some members of the audience. It was a couple with a kid, but the kid looked like me. My grip on the rope loosened. I tried to grab it again, but I couldn't, and I was falling into a pack of lions. They all had their mouths open too, a dozen fangs just waiting to snatch me up. The crowd gasped as I fell. I thought I was for sure about to break a few bones when my fall was cushioned. "Good boy, Rocky," I whispered to my favorite lion after he caught me. He jumped up on the cages and leapt over the rest of the lions with me sitting on his back. The audience cheered and gasped. I stood on Rocky's head and bowed before taking my lions backstage. Everyone backstage crowded me at once, asking if I was okay. They all saw how my hands slipped and thought I was in danger. I realized my parents weren't there, pinching my cheeks and scolding me about not being careful enough. I saw that they were looking through a little gap in the curtains leading to the stage. My dad was rubbing my mom's back, as if to calm her down. I expected a sleepless night from the excitement, but I was tossing and turning with this weird feeling in my gut. For some reason, I kept thinking about that kid I saw. That kid looked exactly like me, maybe around 10 years younger. I knew I was adopted because my parents and I looked nothing alike. Could that kid and I be related? I climbed out of bed and snuck past all the sleeping animals toward my parents' tent. "Guys, I saw this couple with a kid at the show and I began, before my dad burst out crying out of nowhere. My parents were both sitting at the edge of their bed when I walked in. My dad was trying to explain something between sobs while my mom tried to calm him down.
We were scared that you would see them.
My dad managed to say. My mom saw how confused I looked inside. She stood up and took a book out of a nearby trunk. She started flipping through it. It was a photo album full of pictures of our big circus family, as well as me growing up. She finally found what she was looking for, a picture of the first day I met my parents. I had seen it 1,000 times, but she had never taken it out of the album like she did then. She handed the picture to me, and I realized it was folded in half. I unfolded it, and it revealed that little me was standing between my parents and the couple I saw in the audience. They looked annoyed.
"They're your original parents,"
my mom said. I looked up from the picture to find her teary-eyed.
We never wanted you to know how.
My dad trailed off. I asked them to know how... what? They hesitated, but once they explained, I understood. I also wouldn't have told myself my biological parents sold me.
"They didn't exactly sell you. You were throwing a tantrum and they were annoyed, so they left you,"
said my mom, trying to soften the blow. But they still made money from leaving me. The former owner of the circus insisted on giving them something for me, and they decided they wanted some cash. I ran to my room after the revelation. I could feel this pang of pain in my heart. I was devastated. I always thought my biological parents just couldn't raise me for some reason, like other adopted kids' parents, but mine just didn't want me. But I could see them so vividly, laughing with this kid who looked just like me. Why him but not me? How did they love my little brother but have no love for me? I needed answers. My parents being the current owners of the circus had some perks. The ticket lady gave me all the information about the people in the specific seat and row I asked her about. You know, for child abandoners, they were really active in their kids' school community. At least, that's what their social media wanted me to think. So now I knew which school their kid went to, and phase 2 of my plan could begin. I strolled up to this middle school with a huge group of clowns. Literally. Apparently, it's too dangerous to bring lions and elephants to a school. So for the circus promotion, all the school wanted from us was clowns. Pretty lame if you ask me. I excused myself to go to the bathroom. The halls were empty, so sneaking into the office and peeking at some private information was no issue. People really ought to be more careful with their information. Imagine if I was some lunatic. Anyways, now all I had to do was break into my horrible biological parents' house while I knew they were out because I had their schedules memorized. Their house wasn't what I expected. It looked like a kid had decorated it, but in a good way. It was full of color, fun furniture, and there were kids' drawings all over. There was a huge bookcase full of children's books, but in the center of it, there was a thick book on a pedestal. When I opened it, the anger that had been simmering in me suddenly disappeared. It was full of pictures of my little brother growing up, and my, or should I say his, parents were everywhere, smiling, laughing, decorating the house to his taste. I thought, maybe they're not that bad. They seem to really love him. With a warm feeling in my chest, I was about to leave, until I spotted a dusty, old book being used to level the bookcase. I managed to pull it out, and found it was another photo album, but it was empty. Empty except for the first few pages, which were of me. In the pictures with me, the house in the background looked gray. My parents looked annoyed, and it seemed I was desperately trying to bring some color into the house. I didn't know if I felt angry or heartbroken. My little brother was, and is, just like me, but they didn't give him up. Why did they leave me? I composed myself. Then I blew the whistle in my pocket. Time for phase 3. When the front door opened hours later, I was waiting. I heard 3 gasps, then laughter, but only from one person. My little brother ran into the room, which must have looked different from what he was used to, because it was now covered in paint, confetti, and balloons.
Lion Girl!
He exclaimed. That's when our, or his, parents ran into the room.
I'm Micah!
Said my brother. Hi, Micah, I said, before looking straight at his parents and saying, I'm your sister, Leona. The look of horror on their faces was priceless.
What did you do to our house?
Asked the woman who was supposed to be my mother. Micah ran upstairs, probably to see what I had done to his room. Did you think I would never find you, or find out the truth? I asked the couple. I demanded an explanation. The couple started shaking nervously.
We felt bad after what we did,
The man began.
but we want to do better the second time around.
He continued as if it made complete sense. Yeah, mess up your first kid, you can do better next time. I yelled at them. I couldn't bear to look at them anymore, so I left. But I left Micah with them, and that didn't sit right with me. The circus was already on the highway on its way to the next city when I told my parents to stop our fleet of trucks. I can't leave Micah. What if they hurt him? I reasoned with them. My dad thrust some car keys into my hand and told me to hurry up. Circuses are incapable of having normal cars, though. I was so embarrassed driving through the city in a clown car. I barely fit. When I got to the lunatic's house, it was dark already. I parked right next to Micah's window and tapped on it. He opened it, groggy from sleep.
Leona?
He asked, rubbing his eyes. Do you know anyone who might be interested in joining a circus, kid? I asked him nonchalantly. The way his face lit up told me I was doing the right thing. He zoomed around his room, stuffing random things in a bunch of backpacks and throwing them into the tiny car. Micah was climbing into the car when his door burst open and his parents ran into the room, shouting to let their son go. How can your abandoned daughter trust you with her little brother? I yelled as I put the car in reverse. You don't deserve kids like us, I shouted before speeding away.
Where are we going?
Micah asked me. I smiled and told him we were going home, where there's a show every single night. Micah talked on and on about all the cool circus things he wanted to learn, and I couldn't help but laugh. It was crazy seeing how alike we are.